Right, today we're going to make a camera HUD. So to get started, we'll right click on the empty content area, come up here to the search, and we're going to look for widget blueprint right here. Yours might start with this collapse set to the user widget default, but if you open it up, it'll give you a lot of extra options. And what we want to look for is the movie pipeline burn-in widget. We're going to set this as the parent class because this is a default burn-in widget that the MRQ uses, and it has access to specific events that we'll need to pull extra data from. So select this, and we can call this widget blueprint camera HUD. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here to our engine content. And if you don't see this engine content, there's this gear icon right here. You can click on this and select engine content, and that will give you access to the engine content. We'll come over here and we'll search for WBP for widget blueprint viewfinder, and we want viewfinder monitor, this one. So double click to open it up. And the reason we want to start with this one as a template is because it has the lens, the iris, the focus. It has most of what we need already. So over here in your hierarchy tab, you can collapse this down to the canvas panel, select it, right click, copy. Then we'll come back to our content library over here, and we're going to get our HUD that we just made, WBP Camera HUD, and double click to open it up. And right here in our hierarchy, we'll select our camera HUD, and we'll just hit Control V to paste it, and all that information came in, and we're going to use that as our template. There's a lot of extra elements in here that we don't need, like this border background and all that. The only thing we want to keep is the upper text and the lower text. Everything else, we can select it and then delete it. I just hit the delete key on my keyboard. Now we're left with all the pertinent information that we want to get started with. And here is where you can start to customize your HUD for your needs. And I'm going to want to have an artist name, the name of my shot, along with this information that came by default. It has the camera height here already, so I'll add a speed next to it, and then I want to have a frame number. But you can also plug in time code or whatever else you want on your HUD. This will give you the basic information of how to get started. So all of these are currently living in these size boxes. If I just collapse these, you'll see. And the easiest thing I know to do is to just copy paste. So Control C, Control V. That gave me an extra lens. And then I also want this spacer. There's a spacer that goes right between. Give a little bit of space. I want to copy that too. Control C, Control V. And then just drag and drop. Let's select this size box, open it up, and this common text right here lives right here. In the details panel, we can change this. If I want this to be, let's make this the shot label. And then I want this to be the shot display. And if you notice, it still says shot label lens, shot display lens. That's because the text data for it right here hasn't been updated. So you can update it here, but we're also going to update this based on the information that we're collecting from Unreal. So just think of this text as placeholder text. So I know that this is going to be my shot name. And then this one actually matters. Your label matters. So this one, I'm going to call it shot, and I'm going to put a colon just to separate it from the actual shot name. And the other thing that's nice about this is I can give it some padding to the right. I'm going to give it 10 pixels. And what that'll do is it'll have the label shot with the colon. It'll have a little bit of space there, and then it'll have the camera name or the shot name. The other thing you can do in here is this is where you can style the HUD elements. So right now, everything is default to the viewfinder HUD text. I like to personally come in here and get rid of it. I don't like the way it looks. I like to change my font from italic to medium and my font size to 18 because I kind of like it small and sans serif. So I'll probably do that on both of these actually. I won't put padding on this one because it doesn't need it. It has the spacer right after it to give it space from the next element. But I will come down here and I'll change this style to none, and then I'll change my typeface to 18 so that my label and my name are going to be the same. And they're not as big. It's not going to take up as much space. I also want to get an artist name. So I'm going to duplicate this again, and I'm going to need another space. I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm just hitting Control D to duplicate it. And I'm going to drag that up there. And then we'll dive in here and we'll do the same thing for the artist. So I'm going to change this to artist label. And I'm going to change this to artist with a colon after. And then I'll do the same for the display. If it's just you working on your own project, you can come in here and put your own name and it'll always just be your name. But if you're going to have a project where other people are going to be rendering cinematics or whatever, I'll show you how you can pull the artist name from the MRQ as the author, but we'll get to that later. Right now you can put whatever you want. You can put your own name, but we're going to end up linking it later. So there's those two. Now down here we have the height, but I want to put the camera speed. So I'm going to find where this one is, and I want the size box. This is our lower text. I'll duplicate it, and then I'll also duplicate the spacer and drag it above. Same process. Now I'll open up this one, our horizontal. We're going to call this speed label. Speed with a colon. I'll give it the padding to the right, the 10 pixels. And then down here, I'll set this to none. My typeface will be medium, and my font size will be 18. Next, I'll do the height display. I'll change it to speed display. And then here, I'll just put a temporary speed. And then we'll change the style to none. And then my typeface to medium, and my size to 18. That way it's small and consistent. Or the other thing is, this one, you see speed is all caps in both of these. Even though I didn't write it in all caps, I wrote it lowercase. This is another setting in here as part of your appearance. You can come down here to transform policy. It says to upper. This is going to convert everything to uppercase. This is going to convert everything to lowercase. And if you want to use a combination of upper and lowercase, just set it to none. And it'll do whatever you type in here. And then down here at the end, I want to grab this size box. I'm going to duplicate the pan so that I can get the frame number. So I'll Control D to duplicate, and then same with the spacer, drag and drop. And then we'll modify this one. So I'm going to change pan label to frame label, and I'll give it the padding on the right, and then we'll change the text here to frame with a colon. I'll set the style to none, and the typeface to medium, font size to 18. And then the display, I'll change this to frame display. I'll leave it 0 since it's going to end up being an integer anyways, but I'll set the style to none, the typeface to medium, and the font size to 18. And that's basically the layout of our HUD here. The other thing I want to show you, there's this little degrees that comes after the pan. Frame doesn't need it, so I'm going to delete it. But speed right here, what we can do is we can duplicate this field, and we can change this to speed unit. And I'm actually going to do feet per second. And I'll probably just put a little bit of padding on the left to separate it from the speed. So you get the label. This is going to be our units that we pull from Unreal. And this is just going to let whoever is looking at the HUD know that it's feet per second. Same thing over here on focus. The focus distance from the camera to your subject. And I'm going to store that as meters. So I'm just going to duplicate over here in my hierarchy. I'm going to duplicate focus. And then I'm going to say this is going to be called focus unit. And then I want to come up here to where it says focus in the text field. And I just want to change that to an M so that people know when they look at it that this is the focus distance will be in meters. And then I also want to give this some padding to the left so it's not right next to the numbers. And then my focus here, I'm going to go ahead and put the colon, separate it, give it the padding on the right, change the style to none. Iris, doesn't matter. Lens you could do, might as well do this one too. This still says common text block. I like to label everything just so we know what we're looking at. It shows up in different places in Unreal, and if all it says is common text, that's not very useful for me, so I like to give it the description. And then lens, I'll put the colon after. We'll give it the padding on the right, set the style to none, medium, 18. And then the display, I'll just change this while we're here. This one, we want to add a millimeter after it. Since our lenses are always in millimeters, just duplicate the display here. And then it gave this an _1 because I duplicated, but I'm going to change this to unit. And then I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to change this back to just display. That way, when we create our functions later on, it'll say lens display function. I'm going to go back to our lens unit and I'm going to change this text to say mm for millimeter, and we should be good. I'll give it a little padding on the left to separate it from our lens number there. Actually, I'm going to come back and change the height too, because we want to designate the units on our height label. This is height. padding on the right, then our height display. And next to this, I'm going to duplicate the display, and I'm going to change this to unit, and I'm going to change the text to be feet. I'm in the States and I use feet, so you can change it to meters, centimeters, whatever you want to. And I'm going to give it padding on the left, and I want to change this to get rid of the _01. So we have our height number, and I'm designating that whoever is reading this HUD, that my height will be in feet. Compile and save, and then we'll get started on binding the text fields so that we can get the information from Unreal. Okay, so to get started binding the events, we'll come up here and click on graph, and the one we want to use is event tick. So event tick basically checks every single frame, and we're going to use it to grab the Cine Camera actor from the camera cuts window and check that it's grabbing the correct camera at every single frame, because in the camera cuts track you can cut from one shot to the next over one frame, and we want to make sure that we're always grabbing the correct camera. So that's why we're going to use the event tick. So the first thing we want to create here is we'll right click in the empty space and we'll search for get player controller. And the get player controller, it gives us access to all the actors in the scene. We're going to use it to grab our camera from the camera cut track, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to drag off this return value pin, and we're going to get view target, and our view target is going to be our camera cut window, but we need to get the camera that's associated with the camera cuts window. So over here in our variables tab, we're going to create a new variable. We're going to call this Cine Camera Ref, and then I'm going to come over here where it says Boolean. I click on that, and I'm going to do a search for the Cine Camera actor, and we want to get the object reference. And we also want to come down here in the details panel of our variable, and we want to check this instance editable box. That way this variable is publicly available across all of our blueprint widgets. Now coming back over here to our view target, I'm going to drag off of this return value pin, and we're going to look for cast to Cine Camera actor. And now we can use our event tick here, pull the pin off the execute here, and plug it into our cast to Cine Camera actor. And when you cast to Cine Camera actor, this is what's actually giving us access to the Cine Camera actor, obviously, from the camera cut track. So this gets us our list of actors in the scene, this gets us our camera cut track, and this is what's allowing us to access the camera that's associated with the camera cut track. And after this, as Cine Camera actor, we're going to take that variable we just created for the Cine Camera Ref, set Cine Camera Ref. So we're going to set the variable, and this is the variable that we just created. So we're going to look in our camera cut track, we're going to see what camera it is, and we're going to store it as a variable. That's what's going on there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to plug in an is valid, and we don't want the function there. We want to scroll all the way down until you get to the question mark, and this just determines if an object is valid or not. If you don't use these when your blueprint runs, it can throw a lot of error messages in your message log, because sometimes when things fire, it might fire too early or whatever, but this is just a check to make sure that everything is in place before the rest of the function is run. So I'm going to take my Cine Camera reference variable over here. I'm going to hold down the control button, and I'm going to click drag and drop it out into our blueprint graph here. And I'm going to plug the Cine Camera reference into the is valid check to just make sure that our camera is actually being read and stored before we proceed. The other thing that's nice about the is valid is if it is valid, it'll proceed. If it's not valid, you can come down here and create a print string and give yourself a message that says camera check failed. You don't have to do this, just a way to debug it. It's kind of handy to have. Off of this Cine Camera reference variable, I'm going to drag out another pin, and we're going to look for get actor location. So what get actor location does, it finds our camera being stored as our variable, and it gets its current location. And then from here, we also need to create another variable. This one I'm going to call last position, and I want this one to be a vector because we want to get the camera's previous position on the previous frame, and we want to store it as a vector, and the vector is the 3 unit. Here, I'll compile and save. So you can see if I scroll down here in my details panel, the last position has an X, Y, and Z, and that's why we make it a vector. So we want to control click drag this and drop it onto our graph, and we want to do a subtraction node. So we want to get the current position, drag out the return value, and we're going to look for subtract. And we're going to get the current position, and we're going to subtract the last position from it. And this is how we're going to know from the previous frame to the current frame how far the camera has moved. And then we're going to take that information, I'll drag off of the subtract pin here, and we're going to store that information as a vector link since we're dealing with vectors. And then we're going to divide this. I'll drag off the pin here and I'm going to search for safe divide. So we're going to get how far it traveled and we're going to divide it by a delta second. And the way we get the delta second is in our event tick over here. There's this in delta time. And this is what's going to allow us to find out how far the camera traveled over one frame. So I'll plug that into the B channel of our safe divide. And then I'll drag out from the safe divide pin. We're going to do another safe divide. So we're going to take how far our camera traveled over 1 second. And we're going to divide it by 30.48. 30.48 is how I convert. Unreal's default unit is centimeters. So I'm going from centimeters to feet. If you want to do miles per hour, you would divide by 52.8. And if you want to do it by kilometers per hour or whatever unit of measurement you use in your part of the world, you just look it up on Google and it'll give you the number that you should plug in here. So the next thing we need to do is we need to come up here and create another variable. And this time we're going to call it camera speed. And camera speed will be a float. And I'll compile and save. After our safe divide here, we'll drag a pin off our return value and then we'll search for set camera speed. Here's our variable. This is the one we want. So what we're doing is we're getting our camera speed and then we're storing it as a variable. And then off of our is valid over here, if it's valid, continue going. If it's not valid, print that the camera check failed. And then after this set node, we're going to drag off and we're going to do another set. And then we're going to look for our last position variable. And one more time, just to kind of make sure it makes sense for you, is we're getting our camera, we're getting its current location, and we're subtracting its current location from its previous location, the last position. And then we're taking that information and we're storing it as a vector, since it's a vector in world space. Outside of this vector, we're going to divide it by how far it traveled over 1 delta second, and we're going to divide that by 30.48 so we convert the delta second to feet per second. And then we're going to take that camera speed and we're going to store it as a variable. And then we're also going to grab this current position and store it as the last position variable. So when we move to the next frame, it will know that our current position is now the last position. And the only thing we have to do here is plug in our current location and make it our last position location. So that way, when it updates on the next frame, it'll know that our current position is the last position. Hopefully that makes sense. The other thing you can do is, you see how this spaghetti noodle gets kind of clustered in here? You can middle mouse double click on one of these noodles and it'll give you this pin, and this will help you to organize your little cluster here. And if you deselect a pin and you want to select it again, you can't just click it and move it. It'll want to give you another noodle. You have to control click and then you can drag it. The other thing you can do is select multiple nodes here, and if you right click on any of them and go to alignment, you can align them by top, middle, bottom, left, right, center, and then you can also distribute them horizontally. So I'm going to align these by top and then I want to distribute them horizontally just to kind of clean it up. Anyway, that's how we get our camera and we check its camera speed. Okay, so back in our designer tab, the first thing we want to do is, I'll come back to this artist later. I want to set our camera name first. So in order to do that, you select the display name here, and over here where it says text for our shot name, you want to make sure you're not grabbing the label. You want to grab the display. Where it says shot name, I click this little chain link and I want to create binding. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a binding for our shot display text. And what we can do with this is control click drag our cine camera reference out onto the graph here. And I'm actually going to drag a pin off of this executable because I want to look for an is valid, the one with the question mark again, and plug that in so that I can check if our camera is valid. If it's not valid, then I can say add return node. This is just another return node with a value of, I'll put . You can also do a print string here and say camera not found, or shot display camera not found, or whatever you need to do for debug purposes. Back over here to our camera reference variable, I'll drag another pin off and we're going to get display name. And what this will do is it'll get the name of our camera here, and the return the value, we're going to make a to text so that we convert it to text, and we're going to take this return value and plug it into our return node. So if our camera is valid, it's going to get our display name, the name of our camera, going to write it to text, and it's going to store it in our text field here where it says shot name. It'll put our shot camera name. So in your sequencer, if you name your camera shot cam 010 001 for version 1, then it's going to know that that's shot 10 version 1, or however you use it in your pipeline. Name your camera properly and it'll show up here. Then we'll do the same thing for the lens. Come over here to the lens display and click this little chain link and create a binding, and we'll do the same thing. Click drag our camera out, we'll add an is valid, we'll plug in our camera, and this time we're going to get the lens data. So we'll get any camera component, because our lens is a component of our camera, and then from this return value we'll drag a pin and we'll get current focal length, since this is our lens, and then we'll take our current focal length, we'll print it out to a 2text, and then we'll plug that in to our lens data field, and then we can compile and save. I'll go to designer, and then we need to plug in our data for the iris. So we'll click our iris display, we'll click the little chain link next to our text and create a binding, and I'll show you up here in my blueprint tab the functions are being created, and this is where it's important to name your details panel properly, because it stores that function over here. So if our shot display said get common text underscore 01 text, you'd be like, well, what does that even mean? I don't know. That's why we wanted to go through and relabel those shot display text, so that you'll know what they mean when you create the function. So same thing, control click drag your camera out, make an is valid, and then plug in our camera, and then from our camera we're going to get the cine camera component again, and this one is our iris, so we're going to get current aperture, and then we're going to print that to text and store it in our field. Go back to our designer, and we'll grab our focus, and same thing, click the little link here, create binding, give ourselves some space, and control click drag our camera out, create an is valid, plug in our camera, and then here we'll get camera component again, and then from our camera component we're going to get focus distance. And then before we go to 2text on this one, I want to convert this to meters so that the printout knows that the distance from the camera to the subject is in meters. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use a safe divide, and I'm going to divide it by 100, so it converts centimeters to meters, and then off of that we can do our 2text and then print that in the field. And next one we want to do is our speed. We'll select it, create a binding, give ourselves some space, and then since we're dealing with the speed, we're going to come over here and control click drag the speed onto our graph, and then drag a pin off of that and do 2text. And since we calculate the speed already in our event graph here, all we're doing is grabbing that information and plugging it into our speed display. That's all we have to do for that one. Then I go back to our designer, and this time we're going to grab the height, we'll create a binding, give ourselves some space, drag a pin off and do an is valid, and grab our camera, control click drag, plug it into the is valid, and then this time we're going to get the actor location since we're dealing with the height, and then we're going to break this vector, because this actor location is stored as a vector, we're going to break it so that we can just get the Z channel, which is the height channel in Unreal. We'll do a safe divide, and we're going to do the same to convert it to feet, 30.48, so that I know it's however many feet off the floor. From there we'll do our 2text and then plug that into the field input, compile, save. Back in our designer, now we're going to start working on the rotation. So I'll select the rotation, I'll create a binding, do is valid, and we'll grab our camera, control click drag drop, plug it in, and this time we want to get actor rotation since it's dealing with rotation. And then same thing, we want to break it, we want the break rotator, and this will give us the roll, pitch, and yaw. So since we're dealing with the tilt is the same as pitch, we're going to drag off our Y pitch and we'll do 2text, and then we'll print that in the field, file, save. And really I can just copy paste this now. I'll grab just this section here, control C, and then when we come back to our designer and we go to our roll and we create a binding event, I'll give myself some space, and then I'll control V to paste that in here. All we have to do is plug in our executable pin and then change our rotation from pitch to roll, since we're dealing with roll, and then plug this in to the return value, file, save. Then we'll do it one more time for our pan, create our binding event, paste it, control V, plug in the is valid, then yaw is the same as pan, so we'll plug that in and then we'll return that to field, compile, save. And then back in our display for our frame number, I want to check and make sure it has is variable checked, so that'll make sure that this frame display is being stored as a variable. So back in our graph, I want to go to event graph, and this is where we're going to plug in our custom event from the MRQ, the one that we made our parent class, the movie pipeline burn-in widget. We'll right click in the empty space here, and we're going to look for event on output frame started, this one, event on output frame started. For our event widget, I want to drag off the for pipeline here, and we're going to get current shot frame number. This will obviously give us the frame number, and the return value, we're going to take that frame number and we're going to break frame number. And what this does is if you have a frame number that starts on frame 101, it'll break those numbers out into individual numbers 101 so that we can store it in our 2text. I'll drag off the value of the break frame number, and we're going to do 2text again, but we want to make sure to select integer since we're dealing with numbers. If I open up this caret here, you'll see that I can do minimum integral digits. And what this is basically your frame padding. I'm going to put a frame padding of 4. By default, Unreal Engine starts a level sequence on frame 0000, and it's going to get the current frame 0000, break all of those zeros out into individual zeros, and let you store them in the proper frame padding. If you don't do that, when you render your movie, it's going to take your first frame and set it to 0 and count up from there. So it'll be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of 101, 102, 103, or 1001, 1002, 1003. This just lets you have some extra padding number. And then the next thing I want to do is come over here in our variable. We want to look for our frame display since we want to display this in the text field of our frame display. I'm going to control click drag this variable out, and off of this pin I want to set text, and we want to look for the function of the widget. We'll plug the return value of our toText in, and then we'll connect the output executable pin. So again, it's going to grab the current frame number, break those numbers out, store them in the amount of padding you give it, and then it's going to print it to our HUD is what's happening there. I'll compile, save, and then for our artist name, let me go back to the designer. If you don't want to hard code it in and you want to be able to grab it from the movie render queue, from the job author, we're going to set that up. Come over here to the for pipeline. So on this for pipeline, we'll drag another pin off. We'll put it over here so we can do it after our current set text. And we want to get job author. And what this will do is when you open up the movie render queue and you type in your name as the job author, it's going to pull that name from that field. After job author, we'll drag a pin off of this return value and we'll do format text. And then same thing, we'll come over here to our upper display. We'll grab our artist, control, click, drag, drop our artist display. And then off the artist display, we'll drag a pin and we'll do set text again. And we want the function for the widget. We'll plug in the result of that text here, and then we'll connect the execute. And then just like we did previously, if we want to add a little bit of cleanup here, I'll just add a couple of these so that our noodles stay nice and clean. Compile, save. And that should be the whole setup for creating the HUD. So back in our main level here, if I hit play in editor, there's nothing that shows up. And if we wanted to see what our HUD looks like, there's a way we can plug that in. So in this little drop down of the list of world blueprints, we want to open our level blueprint. Since we're working in this main level, we'll open the level blueprint. And then from event begin play, we're going to plug in a pin for our widget here. So we want to create widget. So I just right click in the graph here and I create widget. We want the class to be our widget, the WBP Camera HUD that we made. We'll connect these, and then we want to add to viewport. So I'll drag off this execute pin. We'll do add to viewport, and then we need to let it know that it's our current viewport. So we'll compile and save that. Now back over here, if I hit play, it'll show up the information. It's showing the artist name hard coded because we're not running the movie render queue right now, but you can see all of our data is showing up in here. If I, well, let me hide the floor. No, because we're playing in editor. I'll stop that. Our floor, I'm going to delete it just temporarily, and then I'll hit play again just so you can see the data down here. So our HUD is working, and then I'll control Z to undo and bring our floor back. But it needs a camera to be able to pull data. So to test it out, we'll create a level sequence. I'll call this level sequence test. And then inside that level sequence, we need a cine camera. So I just click this. It automatically gives us the camera cut track, and it automatically connects our cine camera actor to it. So for fun, I'm going to select our camera. I'll hit F2 to rename it, and I'll do .cam.10 version 1. So now we look like we're professionals. Then yeah, I'll go ahead and pilot the camera so that we get some data from it. So I'll set a keyframe on the first frame, come out to the last frame, set a keyframe, and move it around. And I didn't have auto key turned on, so I need to make sure I key that again. So now if I hit play, it's not pulling any of the camera information. And I noticed that sometimes this happens because Unreal, it just gets confused. I don't know how else to explain it. So what I like to do is I just like to save everything. I like to close Unreal, and then I like to reopen it. And once I reopen it, everything should work. I'll cut right here, and that way you don't have to watch me restart Unreal. Okay, now that Unreal has restarted, I opened up the level sequence again, and we'll hit play in editor again. As you can see, I have a shot camera name here. Got the lens data. Let me get rid of some stuff just to make this easier for you to see. I'll get rid of the floor again so you can see the data down there, and then I'll get rid of the clouds, and I'll get rid of the sky atmosphere. So it's nice and black, but if I hit play in editor, you can see that we have the shot camera name, the lens information, the iris, focus distance, and if I hit play, all of our information is updating as it should be. Our camera is 3 feet off the ground. That's the current travel speed. Our pan is going. All this information is being read properly exactly as expected. So I'll stop that. The only reason you're not seeing the frame number and the artist name again is because that information gets pulled by that node chain that references the MRQ. So all of this, the frame number and the artist, won't be pulled in. So in order to see that, let me just undo. The next thing we want to do is adjust our MRQ stuff. So we'll click on the MRQ here. This is an unsaved config. So we'll click on this because we need to add a burn-in, and then our burn-in, we want to change it to be our camera HUD burn-in and JPEG sequence. Let's see. I'll just do one of these so I don't have to worry about dealing with a sequence. And our output movie renders, I'm going to do squiggly bracket sequence, and then I want to do camera name. This will just save it under the sequence name, which our sequence is called LS test, and then it'll pull the camera name and it'll store it in the folder of ShotCam 10 version 1. And you can check that information down here. So our sequence name is LS test, and then our camera name, here's our job author. This is the information we're going to pull as well. Our camera name is just our camera name. I'll hit accept, and then our author, if I type in Smurf, just something that's different. Okay, now that it's done, I'll open the movie and you can see that it has our artist name here is Smurf. It's no longer my name. It has our shot cam number, our lens number, our iris, our focus distance. And then it also has our frame number counting down here, but our frame number is counting incorrectly. It looks like I'll need to fix that. And our height and our speed is good. But the other thing I want to show you is notice that this HUD lives over our image, and we don't want that. We want to have our image clean. We want the HUD to be outside of our rendered image, and I'll show you how to do that as well. First thing we need to do is come back in here and fix our frame number. I'm going to uncheck this is grouping. I think that might be what's giving us the comma there. So we'll do that. We'll compile and save, and then we'll come back over here to our MRQ. The reason it renders the HUD on top of the image is because you have to have this composite onto final image checked in order for it to render with the HUD. So to compensate for this, we need to give it some extra height so that the HUD lives outside of the rendered image. Either way, if you want it to be rendered on top of your image, you just set it to 1920 by 1080, and it'll be on top of your image for editorial. If you don't want it on top of it, just set it to a value that's large enough that it'll go outside. I'll hit accept, I'll render local, and then we'll check the image. There we go. So now all the camera data is there. It's reading the name properly, and there you go. That's how you create a HUD. Hopefully you found that information useful, and thank you for taking the time to watch it.